Okay. There's no questions on that. Then we'll go back to Mr. Collins for a proposed cell tower. We talked about this a couple of years ago, and it never occurred. But now they're back for a cell tower over on Dr. McGinnis.
Thank you, Mr. McCamey. The proposed location that Verizon's bringing forward again is amongst the parking lot of the Dixie House. And they located it there in relationship to the vacant undeveloped tract, because in their negotiation with that property owner to the south, obviously, they did not want that cell tower to be put in any other area that could affect the future development potential of that lot. We'll get into the specifics of that location. We wanted to give you a little preview, if you'll indulge us for just a few minutes, to go back to the telecommunications ordinance that the council adopted back in 2008. Prior to that time, the previous 12 months, we'd had 2 cell phone tower applications, and the council at the time, the Planning and Zoning Commission at the time, was kind of concerned that we did not have an ordinance that would really, at the time, control what was perceived to be a proliferation of these cell phone towers, because no one really knew what was going on in the industry and how many of them would be proposed. And we didn't have anything really to deal with the aesthetics of the cell tower. So the new ordinance that governs the cell towers was approved back in September of 2008. It did a couple of things. It required an SUP to be submitted with a site plan so that you could see a color rendition of what the pole was going to look like. It established the design criteria for that cell tower, that it was going to be a monopole, that it had to be designed by a engineer, and that it had to accommodate 2 other users. Again, you wanted to control the proliferation of the cell towers, so said y'all need to work with one another to be able to co-locate on those towers. And then it established some distance guidelines that will come into play, and the reason why we're really giving you a preview of this, it established a couple of distance requirements. One is that the maximum height of the cell phone tower couldn't exceed 120 feet, and that distance that monopole needed to be from an existing structure needed to be a minimum of 200 feet or a ratio of 3 to 1 to the height of the cell tower that's being proposed. And then you adopted a couple of other provisions that if the tower were to go unused for a year, we would work with them to get it removed. And you allowed the city to hire a technical expert to review the application to verify all the information that the applicant was submitting with their application. So, this technical expert has evaluated the Verizon proposal to locate the cell tower at that location at Dr. McGinnis. And they've concluded in a whole bunch of narrative that would absolutely bore you silly to read through, that they think that the proposal is absolutely justified and will indeed provide the levels of service through the coverage and capacity that they intend for it to serve. As proposed, it's going to meet your technical standards of it being a monopole, and it will be designed to handle a total of 3 providers. It's not going to meet a couple of the guidelines. And what is going to be required is for Verizon to go before the Zoning Board of Adjustment to ask them to consider a waiver from a couple of the guidelines. The guidelines include that when you were establishing the criteria, you said there needs to be a 5,000-foot separation as a guideline when they come in. That's what we need to work to achieve. Well, there were 2 cell towers that they were aware of. One of the cell towers no longer has the appropriate licensing from the FCC, so that can't be used. And then there is another cell tower that's located on the north side of Airport Freeway that if they were to locate there, it would not provide the coverage in the southern part of Euless that they intend for the coverage and capacity from a technical standpoint. So, before going to the Zoning Board of Adjustment, we wanted to give y'all a preview of what the ZBA was being asked to consider, because if the ZBA were to approve the variances, then you would be seeing a SUP application upon a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission. So, having explained what the criteria was, the two variances again are: can you locate it a minimum separation of 5,000 from other cell tower? And the technical expert is saying no, that they cannot. And then the separation from an existing structure where they're proposing to locate would be about 230 feet away from the Dixie house. Based on the height that they are requesting, it would need to be 330 feet away from it. They're getting a waiver from the owners of the property as well as the owners of the business, which is Dixie House, which I think we may have told y'all before. We've been in discussions with them. They are expected to come in and submit remodeling plans to reopen that restaurant this fall in anticipation of the construction activity ending by year's end. As part of that remodel, their primary entrance, or a additional primary entrance, is to be on the south side, because that's where a lot of the parking is. So the language in the ordinance that deals with the consideration of the variance requests is really whether or not the literal enforcement of the development standards put an undue hardship upon the applicant. And the technical expert and, of course, Verizon would argue that they are trying to meet the spirit and intent of the ordinance, and that the placement there would enable them to provide the coverage and the capacity that they would desire. I think as best we could determine, this was the fourth application of a cell tower, but that's really counting Verizon submitting theirs twice. So since the new ordinance was adopted in 2008, this would be the second application that would be coming forward as a specific use permit. And of course, that would be only coming forward if the ZBA were to grant the variances to those two standards.
I have a couple of questions. Number one, do we consult land that Bell Helicopter is consolidating all of their businesses into one area over there? Did we ever consult with them to see that our cell towers are within a reasonable height?
I believe that that's governed by the FCC when they are considering a license for the cell tower, which part of the technical criteria that y'all established in this ordinance is that they be appropriately licensed to the FCC. I would imagine that that would be part of the consideration of the FCC.
I hope that it would, because at one time they came to us to request that people didn't build such islands because of helicopter use. The second is, you mentioned that one of the cell towers was not in use.
Yes, the FCC, the licenses that would be required for that cell tower operator have expired.
So, does the cell tower just stand there?
The process to get it removed.
Nothing in that area.
Exactly.
If my memory is correct, when we approved this previously, we had specific requirements for the appearance of this
Exactly.
tower, and we had a monolith design with the words Euless on it,
Exactly.
if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly.
I'm familiar with a lot of cell towers around the country, especially in the more arid desert parts of the country, where the cell towers are not identifiable at all. They look like palm trees. I mean, you can't tell them from the real thing. And but I realize that you're talking about 110 feet, and that would be a very, very tall tree. But I would really appreciate it if you would ask them to consider a design that would maybe blend this in with our community. I don't know exactly whether it would be a tree or what it might be, but I know that those things are possible.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's, when we had this discussion before, you know, we talked about a number of things. I think at the time you brought up that palm tree. Look, this is just kind of an introductory topic tonight. I would encourage you to look in Bedford at where the CI Host building was. There's now a cell tower, and it's got some stuff on it, some writing on it. And then look right over here, just south of Midway, this one that's gone up several years ago, that is just a white pole. And look at those and let us know what you think, because it's, we are kind of the opinion, even though we were in favor of the you know, putting you on it or something, we're kind of the opinion of the staff that the plain pole kind of goes away. But I remember you bringing that up, so that's why we'd be interested in hearing your thoughts. Obviously, and I've never seen a palm tree. I don't know how that works. 110 pieces of tall palm tree. But I think they'll do whatever they want us, whatever we want them to do to an extent. But if y'all would look at those and, you know, give us your thoughts.
Up north, they put them as big trees. The problem they do is during the wintertime when the trees lose everything, they're really fake looking because they're in the middle of a park.
That could be an evergreen pine tree.
Could be.
I think the plainer they are, the more invisible they come faster.
Yeah, the one in Southfield that's on Pipeline and Main, behind that church is plain white pole, and nobody pays any attention to it anymore. When it first went up, you noticed it. Now I don't even pay that much attention to
You
it.
notice the one in Marsville, right at that center, but they have so many health things on it.
Yeah, that's a tree.
Right.
And that is a good part of the other design feature is all of the stuff is internal to the structure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that, we just wanted to introduce this to you. If you had any major concerns, had any thoughts, I appreciate that comment. And if y'all would look at the one in Bedford, what's it say Bedford?
Got their
Got their
logo, got their
logo.
name.
Logo on it. To me, it draws more attention to it. But if y'all would look at it and see, and then look at this one and the one on South Pipeline, just east of Main Street, kind of on the church.
I was just driving by the other day and noticed that everyone.
So if you want us to try to work with them, we'll just let us know. Obviously, they gotta get past CDA before they even have the opportunity. But the reason we want to bring it up is to get your thoughts and get your input.
And we'd be trying to take that on July the 25th.
So
The ZBA. Yes, sir.
all right. Well, I have
By the
found
way,
myself.
if you want to know how much 110 feet is, there's a flagpole that doesn't have a flag on it at the corner of Industrial and Highway 10 in that bank lot there. That pole is 107 feet tall.
It's, I can remember when there was a flag, and I lived down on Franklin. At times, I could hear that flag.
Well, when you were in an office in that building, you can certainly hear it.
It was loud. Okay, it is 5:30. One real quick update. Chris had to step out. He's had a real family situation. His mother is calling, and hopefully he'll be back. But on the water update, our water levels regionally are at 75%. You recall that the restrictions were put in, actually went with about 75.5%. So, and 75% is the actual triggering mechanism. We have not implemented those here. We just call your attention to the fact it is now about 6 or 7 weeks till our next council meeting. And that is the ordinance gives me the authority to implement those. And if it doesn't rain in the next few few weeks, we're gonna have to, I don't know, I've got an exact idea of at what point, but we've now dropped 75%, and if it just continues to drop somewhere along the way, we'll have to, we'll let you know ahead of time. It does not take council action, but normally we would give you a heads up. We had a council meeting with the government about this time it's going to be used some of this. But, you know, if we, one tropical storm, we change that drastically. Cedar Creek, I think it's about 3 feet down, so it's not in terrible condition, but the other reservoirs come into play on that. And I think we'll stop right there. I hope we go to closed session 6, but we're not going to be able to. When we come back, we'll talk about email and cover our agenda that quick and into a closed session. So I think it is the Euless